Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, the Michigan Commitment Sweatshirt coming back on. And this one, I'm fired up to get into a fascinating commitment on the defensive line. Four-star defensive lineman McHale Blade from Chicago, Illinois, committing to Michigan. The first thing you got to talk about with this kid is the versatility that he brings to the table, where you look at the film and say plays a lot out there on the edge. Very much has the length and athleticism to make it work out on the edge as well. But then you look at the body type and say, it looks like this kid has the body of, he just looks at the Michigan weight room. He's probably going to gain 10 pounds. I think you can put a lot of weight on this kid the right way and have him be a really, really athletic and long three tech. We'll see what Michigan decides to do with McHale Blade. But at the end of the day, you get a lot of length. You get a lot of power. Most importantly, this kid plays with an exceptional motor. And that's something that every Michigan commitment we break down, especially with these defensive linemen, it always seems to be the case. You know, these guys that come to Michigan, they play hard, they play the right way. That's something that's important to Sherrone Moore in this Michigan football program. Got a really interesting player comp for a guy like McHale Blade as well. Going to talk McHale Blade. Then we're going to talk about where Michigan goes from here on the recruiting trail, where you've seen a lot of programs kind of wait until that house settlement came down, until they started having those big boy conversations and start going after some of the top names on their board. Well, we just got that on Friday night. Wouldn't be surprised if Michigan kicks it into another gear on the recruiting trail now that there's a little bit more clarity in terms of what the revenue share is going to look like and what NIL is going to look like. Fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, to the Michigan fans, I just want to say thank you to you guys. And I think, secondly, buckle in. I think it's going to be a really fun next couple of days and weeks and maybe even months for this Michigan program on the recruiting trail. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it. Now, McHale Blade, a little bit. Here's the player comp that I'm going to go with, and that's Mike Morris. Now, you go back to Mike Morris coming out of high school was 6'5", 260, and you looked at him and said, hey, like, has some really intriguing traits out there on the edge, and that's where he started his Michigan career, but was always a guy that you felt like was going to comfortably get up to around 300 pounds. Once Mike Morris moved to the inside, really gave interior offensive linemen some problems with the length and athleticism. I think you could even look at a guy like Nate Marshall coming into the 2025 class and say very similar conversation. Get him on campus. He's a really good football player. He's a really good athlete. Figure out where that body goes and then put him where you think he's going to have the most success. I'll say this, with these kind of kids coming out of high school where maybe they're a little bit of tweeners, Michigan's had a ton of success with these dudes. Mike Morris, a really good example. How about Chris Jenkins? Chris Jenkins came into Michigan 6'4", 240. Left Michigan 6'4", 300 pounds, and was one of the better interior defensive linemen we've seen play for this program, having a very successful career in the NFL. Eno Etta, another guy that you could probably throw a player comp onto. Really big, looks like he can put on a lot of weight. We'll see what they decide to do with a guy like McHale Blade, but when it comes down to it, you look at him and say, I feel pretty good that he's going to work out, whether it's as a three tech, whether it's out on the edge. Now, as an edge defender, really heavy hands and kind of overwhelmingly powerful. I don't think there's a lot of tackles that can deal with the horsepower that McHale Blade brings to the table. Now you kick him onto the inside. I don't think there's a lot of interior offensive linemen that can deal with the athleticism and length that this kid has. So wherever he does end up and wherever that body type takes him to, you have a pretty good feel that he's going to be really successful. And I think the second conversation here is really big win on the recruiting trail, kind of going head to head against Notre Dame. Like, Notre Dame liked this kid a lot as well. I think Michigan's track record with defensive line development, whether it's out on the edge, whether it's on the inside with guys like Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, that has to be a driving factor in this recruitment where, look, I'm not oblivious to revenue share and NIL playing a role in all of these high-profile recruitments, but at the same time, Michigan is selling, in my opinion at least, another level of development on the defensive line. And I think that's very attractive to a guy like McHale Blade. And Lou Esposito, I think, is doing a great job, not only in terms of player development, but I've been really impressed with what he's done on the recruiting trail as well. Big time commitment with McHale Blade. And I think for us Michigan fans, we're hoping this kind of sparks a little bit of a run on some of these high profile guys where you look at Michigan's, kind of mock class, the targets that you'd really like to see Michigan go out and get. It seems like as you go into the official visits, as you have more clarity in terms of revenue share and NIL, I think you're going to see Michigan have some more of these big boy conversations, you might say, as well as, hey, Sean McGee. It was sure Sean Maggie should get his name right. There was some rumors that Michigan's general manager would be jumping ship to Navy and become their next athletic director. He's going to stay up in Ann Arbor. That he further pushes us to this thought process that, hey, I think Michigan's going to start turning it up and having some of these big boy conversations. Let's talk about this defensive line real quick. Tariq Bonney, McHale Blade, two guys that you have committed so far in the 2026 class. Trenton Henderson was just on campus. It sounded like that visit went pretty well for Michigan. You obviously are getting Carter Meadows on campus a little bit later on in this month. There are some heavy hitters that Michigan will take big swings with over the next couple of days and weeks. And I think what excites you is, all right, McHale Blade, one of the more high-profile wins for Michigan in the 2026 class. Does that get the ball rolling with some of these high-profile guys where, number one, I think Michigan's done a really good job building the foundation of their class in 2026. Now it's about getting some of those top priority names that are at the top of your board. We're going to see that play out over the next couple of weeks and months. And I think you're already starting to see it play out with a guy like Kerry Adams where, going into the official visit weekend, I don't think Michigan was really considered a massive player in this recruitment. I think there was a lot more buzz around Penn State. There's a lot more buzz around Oregon. I think there's probably more buzz around Notre Dame as well. Leaving the official visit, it sounds like Michigan is right in it for a guy like Kerry Adams. And it sounds like some of those big boy conversations were had with a guy like Kerry Adams where, look, when you want to land these guys that everybody in the country wants, those conversations have to take place at some point if you want to land their commitment. Shamari Earls was the guy that was hosting Kerry Adams on his official visit. And I'll say this, the player comp is very, very similar. Shamari Earls, big, long cornerback that has some really good track and field numbers. Kerry Adams, very similar. Probably a little bit less physically developed than a guy like Shamari Earls. Like Shamari Earls going into a senior year was damn near 200 pounds. But both very similar players that have very, very good size, very good length, and very good track and field backgrounds. McHale Blade, I think for a lot of Michigan fans, you hope gets the ball rolling for Michigan in the 2026 class where the next 2 weekends, that's when you're having all of these big names on campus, right? Savion Hyder, he's coming on campus for Michigan this weekend. Obviously, probably the top priority for Michigan in this 2026 cycle. Carter Meadows going to be on campus. A lot of your offensive line guys are going to be on campus. Malachi Lee, Kevin Abbott. We're going to see how it plays out for Michigan. I think this gives you a lot of confidence that we're starting to get some traction with some of those top names on Michigan's board. And I love this kid. I think he's going to be a really good player for Michigan. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.